Before Pink Floyd's next album could be released, the band was experiencing financial difficulty. The band had put all of their savings and trust in the investment opportunities that were presented by a company that unfortunately had invested in very poor business choices, failing businesses at that. Not to mention were charging the band tax brackets on the up end of 83%, thus rendering them in financial disrepair. While on tour for Animals, Roger Waters also noted that there were a bunch of unruly fans that made him feel increasingly alienated, to the point where he got so angered at them one night that he actually had spat on one. What actually happened was, due to all of this and due to conversations with somebody who was close with the band, the initial concept of the wall was first conceived. Whenever he took the idea to the band, he also had a second idea in mind, which was an idea that was going to later become his solo album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. The band then decided that they wanted to do the original idea that he had presented, a 90-minute demo entitled Bricks on the Wall. The resulting double LP, or double album, was, of course, later shortened to just The Wall, and still maintains itself as one of Pink Floyd's best-selling records, not to mention also the one record that spawned a feature film based around their music, as opposed to them writing the music for the film. This double LP is extremely theatrical in its notion, and it's something that goes alongside with the theatrical release all the more. However, this is also an album that seems to embody the idea of the concept album that we've seen in some traditional styles by other bands, where it seems to be following some sort of script or storyline. Something that we saw in the loose-based concepts from before, however, not something that followed necessarily a direct track-by-track following. Something instead that, with The Wall, we saw a story unfold out of 2 discs, out of nearly 90 minutes worth of music that built upon itself and really told a direct story, a direct tale, almost as though you were reading a piece of literature. And this is something that made this album, firstly, very unique from the other ones, but at the same time also a little bit more of a daunting of a task for the band. This is a task for the band that spawned a couple of very large singles, including Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. Of course, there was Mother, there was Comfortably Numb, Run Like Hell. There were a lot of great songs off of this record, and this is a record that still holds up to the test of time today. This is still an album that definitely has a lot of people in this new generation, this generation of kids even younger than I am. You know, in fact, kids probably half my age are still picking up records from Pink Floyd, including The Wall, in order to really get their feet wet with the band and really explore why this band and why this album in general was considered to be so legendary. For me, however, this is an album where it gets a little tedious. This is an album that has a great story. This is an album that also has a great concept. This is an album also that has great execution in some areas. The theatrical element sometimes can be a little bit annoying, and at the same time also it just seems as though some of the ideas used to build atmosphere are kind of just milked. This is an album that has a lot of upside. However, the downside exists in the fact that it seems to get a little bit over-obsessive, or a little bit over-excessive. One of the two. Whenever this concept was made, you could definitely tell that Roger Waters was undergoing a bit of a writing style change. Whereas the band was being kind of included with everything that they were doing before, though he was still principally in charge. This is an album that was mainly done by Roger Waters, and the band was there as paid performers. In fact, one of them left during the sessions of the band, but still remained on salary as a musician. Overall, this is an album, though, that shows what happens whenever Roger Waters kind of takes the lead on things. With the idea of Bricks on the Wall, he was exploring the idea of isolation, of loneliness, of dealing with of losing his father in World War II, and having a mother that was kind of protective, so to speak. Having his marriage fail. Having various items happen where he basically just feels like he's behind this wall, and that's where he wants to be, that's where he needs to be, to kind of keep himself away from all of the damage that had been done to his life on the outside. The character that, of course, is used here is the character Pink, which is ironic because, of course, the band's name is Pink Floyd, but also Pink is the question that was asked in the track from Wish You Were Here, Have a Cigar, by the way, which one's pink? So, interesting that Pink ends up being the character in the trademark Wall album. This is an album, though, that will forever stand the test of time because of its lavish theatrical representation. This is an album that's, for the time, was really just unlike a lot of what you heard, and especially at the turn of the 1980s. This is an album also that, with the theatrical release of the film, really took psychedelia to a new form of height, especially with people that were to discover it 10 to 20 years later, where it became a frequent movie to watch while enjoying the warm glow or suffering the warm glow of psychedelic or other drugs. This is also an album that certainly seems to reflect the sentimental loneliness that Pink Floyd and Roger Waters were really aiming to represent in the music here. Overall, this is a good album. This is not something that I'm going to necessarily sit here and say that I'm going to bash apart. It's just not one that I find to be the top of the top. And I know that I've said that about Dark Side of the Moon as well. However, I find Dark Side actually to be a better album than The Wall. If I were to really go 1, 2, 3, it would probably be Animals, Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon, with The Wall coming in at a close number 4. So, personal opinions aside, though, The Wall is still a huge commercial success, selling 11.5 million albums, or 23 million units. Considering it being a double album, it counts as 2. Commercial success of this, not to mention also coupled with the fact that the band was finally getting their mojo back, which means also getting their money back, meant that a huge tour would follow. However, after that, the Roger Waters assumed control, would create one more album. Would this album be a masterpiece? Or would this finally be the breaking point for one of the most important bands that the 1970s saw?